It will never not amaze me that we have had 9 live-action Spider-Man movies, and not a single one of them has had Black Cat, who I would say is one of Spider-Man's most important supporting characters, and probably tied with Venom as the most significant Spider-Man character not created by Stan Lee. I've always enjoyed that she has this very unique relationship with him in terms of being a fellow superhero who, unlike Mary Jane or Gwen, for example, doesn't really tend to end up being a damsel in distress, but also, in many cases, acts as a good foil for Mary Jane in terms of being less accepting of Peter for the entirety of who he is. Now, Brand New Day's basic story, right, like the skeleton of it, is Peter Parker learning that he does not have to be by himself, that he doesn't have to do things on his own. Having Black Cat as a fellow superhero that, like Punisher, he teams up with pretty frequently, has a good working relationship with, I think could have enhanced the movie significantly. Now, superhero movies in general have this weird hang-up on characters having multiple love interests. There were scenes deleted from Iron Man 2 that hinted at a romance between Tony and Natasha. The second Thor film hinted at the idea of a love triangle between Thor, Jane, and Sif before cutting the latter two from the next movie. It's not a coincidence that in Homecoming, Peter shows no interest in MJ whatsoever because Liz is the love interest of that film. But in the next movie, now that the position of love interest has become vacant, suddenly he likes MJ. And I bring this up to say that not having a love interest for Peter, besides MJ, in this film, reinforces this idea that he can't move on. I've even seen some people defend this by saying we can't expect them to not be together because Tom Holland and Zendaya are married in real life, as though real life should determine what fictional characters end up together. The fact is, with No Way Home having the ending that it did, with Peter erasing the memories of MJ and Ned, people who waited 4 years for this movie were not incorrect or wrong to have expected other Spider-Man supporting characters to come in and play similar roles and then be disappointed when we just get him pining for the same people that we were misled into thinking he would move on from. And I was someone who was worried about the movie being overstuffed. But when I make my insertions, right, I rewrite a movie, I try to look at, again, the film. And you could cut out the Elena stuff, really miss nothing. That saves us like 5 minutes. But also, a lot of the scenes I would add Black Cat in are already in the proper film. I think I maybe would add 2 scenes at max where it's just her and Spider-Man and nobody else. So the movie could start off the same way it does, right, with Jean possessing the lady to drive the tank through, but I would have, right, the addition of Black Cat, and I would establish very early on that Peter will often tell her, hey, if you don't help me with this, I'm going to assume you're stealing something. You have like as a running gag, like a little joke of just, the reason you're not as helpful as Frank is that you're going and committing crimes behind my back while we're busy. For that whole sequence of just the chase, right, to get to MJ before Jean, body hops her way over there, I would have a little short, not even half a minute scene of just Black Cat stealing a jewel or something, which would explain, where she is while this is going on. And I would also have it to where there would be a scene early in the film, probably again between the first encounter with Jean and also the chase, where it's just Black Cat and Spider-Man, right? He's swinging around, she's jumping around, etc. And she just kind of asks him, do you really do this every day? And he kind of has like a joke of like, oh, I have to. Otherwise, who's going to stop you from your thieving ways? And, she would notice that he's kind of evasive in his answers if she asks about, his personal life. And she would say, I don't really care, whatever. This is kind of meant to be a little bit of a mirror of what's going to come later with MJ asking about if there's a Mrs. Spider-Man. Now, I would have it to where when Punisher and Spider-Man go to confront Jean, they have it to where Black Cat is supposed to like keep guard over MJ. And of course, MJ finds the note, realizes who Spider-Man actually is, that she had a relationship with him. And I would have Spider-Man chew out Black Cat for not keeping a closer eye, but she's like, hey, I was just standing outside. I didn't know she would roam around like she did. Again, this would create another source of tension between them. And it would be around this time that I would have a comic recreation. So when Spider-Man first reveals his identity to Black Cat in the comics, she's disgusted. You know, it ruins the illusion of him that she's built in her head. And I would want Brand New Day to have this scene, right, recreated in live action, because it would serve as another reminder for Peter that he cannot always recreate the dynamics he had with MJ and Ned. And again, I would have this come after he's already taken his mask off, right, and had that talk with MJ that's in the proper in the proper version of the movie, so as to make this an inversion where, at the request of someone else, he takes his mask off. You know, the request of a person that he no longer is close with, but with the person that he's becoming closer to, he willfully reveals himself to her and gets rejected. And she would realize, you know, what she's done. You know, and we would follow this up with a scene where she admits to overreacting, but admits that she prefers the Spider-Man part and wants to keep that intact. This could also be something that could lead to some character development for her, presuming that we use her for, you know, Spider-Man 5 and 6 and whatnot, where, again, like layers, right? So she doesn't mind talking to him about most things, but, you know, calling him Peter, seeing what he actually looks like, that's not what she's interested in doing now. But most of the rest of the movie would play out pretty much the same, right? Have her trying to, like, just reacting to Jean threatening the whole city, and after, you know, Spider-Man gets shot, you could have Punisher kind of make, like, mention that she came to see him, but she didn't really like looking at his regular face too much. And there's nothing else to insert her in after that, because it's all just stuff with Peter and his civilian identity. But there you have it. Most of her scenes are just add-ons to stuff that's already there. I think she could have a pretty unique dynamic with Peter in terms of, again, being the love interest who's mainly interested in the superhero side of him. And I think introducing her in the same film where he's still pining for MJ opens the possibility that we can, you know, move on, even if we still have to address or have her in this to some extent. Because I would have preferred to just not have her or Ned, but if we have to have them, having some of the more well-known Spider-Man characters like finally appear, I think would be seen as a gesture of goodwill in terms of getting him more to that position of being a traditional version of the character. And it needs to be said, I don't hate Tom Holland, I don't hate MCU Spider-Man. All the criticisms that I have had over the years come from a place of wanting to see one of my favorite IPs succeed. And that was why Brand New Day was such a frustrating watch, because there's a lot of it that I do like, but the parts that are, you know, not sticking the landing are very jarring to me. Because I feel like No Way Home, you know, making a sequel to that, there's a lot of ways that can go. But one of the few mandates that movie had was you need to move on. And they had a lot of things they could have done. They could have just had Zendaya and Ned in cameos. Not at all. But this whole thing of wanting to have them still play, you know, supporting roles, and even have one of them kind of still be at the center of the conflict with the villain, it's just a sign of a series that refuses to progress the character. And I think if they had put Black Cat in there, that could have been one sign that they were actually trying to do something different than having him pine over the same love interest that he was supposed to be done with after the previous film. And I do agree with one person who wrote a comment that said, if they had cast Sydney Sweeney, Zendaya's Euphoria co-star, to play the new love interest to Tom Holland, that would have been the funniest thing ever.